Friday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Business Strategy Roundtable. Today, John Robertson, a good friend of mine, founder of enCircle Marketplace, is joining us for a conversation about Google's Willow AI and what it potentially means, or what it does mean for the future of artificial intelligence, and some of the short-term stuff as well. Before we dive into that, I want to make a couple of announcements that I'm pretty excited to be able to talk about. One, my company, TriUnity Strategies, recently finished a pretty decent-sized overhaul of our website, providing a ton more detail in terms of what specifically we do to engage and support with startups, IT service providers, restaurants, and small businesses. Another thing that is a part of that website update was the introduction of an events calendar where you can find all of the future live podcasts, as well as some other exciting things, like when our leadership and skills development program meets, when we're doing live career and business support strategies on Twitch, while we will be streaming strategy games. And we had our first live stream this past Wednesday, which was really exciting. We did some team fight tactics, and some workshops and live fitness events are also going to be able to be found on that events calendar. So those are some exciting things that we've made some progress on. And if you get the chance to check that out, you should, because there's some cool stuff there. And the majority of it is free and educational for folks to be able to lean in and grow with. So with that, we're going to dive into our conversation today. And I want to say hello to John and thank you for being here, man. How was your week?
Not too bad. I moved, so my background doesn't look good. So I put a wall in place of it.
I was going to ask you, but I almost said, you usually have a pretty good background. You should take that thing down. How was the move?
Oh, it's just I have a small office, so it went pretty smoothly.
Oh,
anyway, let's get going about the Willow AI, because it's actually more than artificial intelligence. It's actually a pretty big leap in quantum computing.
You're pumped to dive in, huh?
Well, yeah, because it's going to change the world. I mean, it's part of your point. Now, most articles will say it's 2 to 3 years out, which is fine. But
in terms of impact, you mean?
In terms of getting it in people's hands.
Oh, wow. That's faster than what I would think.
Well, it could go. There's a lot of excitement around it, and I believe it's going to go as fast as it can. And there's competition. So IBM's been researching this, but IBM has the problem of it being liquid, super cooled. So you have to have, liquid helium or something, liquid nitrogen to bathe the chips in to keep the quantum states going. And I've been reading some research on this. I mean, so they're making pretty good strides in the networking side of quantum computing.
Let's go all the way to the front, because you're in the middle, and I'm excited to hear what you're about to say. But I'm sure there are folks that are like, "Wait a second, what even the fuck is Willow?" Let's start there, and you can just I have a whole list of questions for you, but I can see that you're extreme. You've got some tracks that you want to run on, and I want to give people what they want, which is you being an expert and talking about it. But let's just start at the front, which is what is Willow and what is the jump that you're talking about, and how is it different from what people are not even really used to yet, but starting to get more used to?
Yeah. Okay, so Willow is a hardware chip that does quantum computing. And what Google has press released is that the computer can do in 5 minutes what would take today's supercomputer 10 trillion years.
What does that even mean?
Well, computers today do things one at a time, is what it means. Where the quantum chip can do it 1,000 at a time, 10,000 at a time, right? So you can see the divisor there of if we took our normal computational load that we're used to right now, and you just made it, well, 1,000,000,000 times faster. Now the clock spins the gears start turning in your head of that's why the world is changing. And it's why it's why it unsettles the current state of things, because and not just AI, just everything. So if you take secrecy or cryptography today, it's all measured in time to break. They never say it's perfect protection. They just say it's going to take this long to break. Well, if you can divide how long to break by 1,000,000,000 now, and Google has it on a chip that you can put in a phone. Now your phone
Is
can,
it that small?
I believe
Oh,
it.
I guess 3 to 5 years is what you were saying, into people's hands.
Well, and I'm speculating a little bit. I haven't seen any release on the research because, of course, they're going to keep that under wraps. I'm sure they'll do a patent at some point, and I don't know if Google's going to do Apple's game or they're going to do IBM's game.
I see.
Apple never. They are afraid of. It's kind of weird, but they're afraid of leaks. So they won't even tell the patent lawyers the invention until it's manufacturing ready.
Oh, I
And
see.
so
And IBM's game?
And IBM's game, they go after patents as fast as they can get them.
Get ahead of the competition.
Yeah, and they'll do.
IBM trusts their lawyers more than Apple trusts their lawyers.
IBM trusts,
or they have more lawyers well. Anyway, I won't go down that thought track. Keep going.
Well, and from IBM has a patent war chest, right? So
yeah,
they don't care about patent infringement, because if somebody approaches them that way, they pull out their portfolio and sue back.
Right.
And
that's their
I'm
strategy.
sure
They're ready to rock, where Apple probably doesn't have from a staff.
And so that's why that's why they're encouraged to have a patent mill of any idea. Anyway, so
does Google has Google shown, forgive me for cutting you off because I know there's lots to be said, but has Google shown,
please do.
Thank you. Has Google shown a tendency to lean one way or the other in the past, or are they largely not? I mean, obviously Google is largely innovative, but I'm not super tuned in to what's being patented. And, this is all tertiary to me in terms of what I pay a whole lot of attention to. Have they leaned in one direction in the past in terms of how they approach this type of thing? Or have they just not done a ton of research that ultimately has required patents? And that doesn't seem likely, but I guess it's possible.
No, I think it's more that as a relatively new company. I mean, IBM's been around for
that's a fair point.
A long time, so they've been in the game a long time. And Google has not been in the game a long time, and not that they're bad, but they seem to approach things. They're going through the front door, if you will.
Sure. Yeah. Strategy maybe not yet defined, which is why you said we'll kind of see which way they go.
Yeah. That I'm not saying they're immature, but they're not as mature as the IBM, the AT&Ts that have been playing the game a lot longer, and as such, they just have a much more sophisticated game. So that being said, that's where I'm bringing my own assumption that Google won't talk about certain things about this AI chip, this Willow quantum computing chip, because they are sitting on a patent. And if they publish it, they'll undermine the patent.
Mm. Okay.
Anyway, let's say it's 5 years. If 5 years, all computer equipment's obsolete, all phone, you can imagine how that will just, in some ways, destabilize society, but in other ways,
propel.
Propel, right. Because it's going to be another economy of scale, just in a super significant way.
Well, all right. So I want to go back to the trillions and trillions of years quicker than what our computers can do now. And I asked you, what does that mean? And you started talking about computers now primarily do things in single processing, and what the Willow chip is capable of doing is quantum processing. Could you go into some more depth there and just like hit me with the layman's,
Yeah. I've been looking for a picture that describes this that I could share with you, but it's not coming.
Well, you just let me know, and we can share screen or anything. You feel
right.
like you're driving. I want you to feel that.
So people are familiar with. I bought this new Intel chip, and it has 12 cores, and I get 24 threads out of it. So that's a familiar thing for the IT people. Now, what happens in actuality is, even though there's 24 threads, they're not really, they're able to run in parallel as long as they're not working on the same thing. Does that make sense?
So they're still single processing, but they're solving multiple problems at a time singularly. Right.
What quantum computer does is the quantum register, if you will. So in a computer sense, you put the data in a register and then you do something with it, or you have 16 registers and you say register 1 gets multiplied by register 2, or they're added, or there's these base underlying instructions that happen, including go get the piece of memory and put it in the register, and go get another piece of memory and put it in the register. Now do something between the registers and then put it back. So this is what the threads are doing. In a quantum computer, what they turn on their head is, so let's say that I'm trying to break an encryption, and so I'm trying to guess somebody's password, right? So I try one password. I try a second password.
It's always password 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Well, and to optimize it as a programmer, I have a list of common passwords, so I try all those first, right? I've just economized my algorithm. Now, in what quantum computing does, as long as the quantum register is large enough, I do all the passwords all at the same time with one instruction. So today's technology, I permutate, if you will, all the possible passwords one at a time. Is it A? Is it B? Is it C? Is it D? Is it AA? Is it AB? Is it A? Exhaustive, right? You can see that goes to infinity. That's why it's the 10 trillion years. Yeah. That's why it's the 10 trillion years, roughly, because it's always the password I check last, right? Because then I'm not going to check anymore. Right. That's why the password guessing of a good password will take the 10 trillion years, and that's why people are like, oh, well, that's good enough. They're not going to guess your password. In the quantum thing, because of how quantum physics works, they are guessing all the passwords all at the same time. So it's as if the answer pops out, right? What's the password? oh, this one actually worked, that's the password. So you can see how in one instruction I've guessed the password, where today's technology I have to guess them one at a time.
And how in the hell does that happen? I guess you may not. That might be the secret sauce, but for Google,
well, right, that gets into the quantum physics. So in quantum physics, they have what they call the uncertainty principle. So if so when they measure something in quantum physics, the measurement disrupts the state of the physics. And so the point is a common thing they'll say, you can guess the position of the electron, or you can guess the speed of the electron, but not both. Because if you measure speed, the position gets disrupted. If you measure position, the speed gets disrupted, right? Your measurement influences the state of the physics.
Because you're taking it at a moment in time, or you're taking it over time.
Well, Heisenberg has the classic, is the cat dead or alive? You have a cat in a cardboard box.
Is that Heisenberg? Is that Schrodinger? Is that Schrodinger?
Yeah.
Is his first name Heisen?
Heisenberg, Schrodinger, yeah.
That's the boy? I did not know that.
Schrodinger, anyway. Yes, that's Schrodinger's uncertainty problem. So you put the cat in the box, it was alive. Is it alive or dead? It's both, right? So you put the password, you put the encryption in the box. Is it this password or not? When you open the box, that's when you know. But while it's in the box, it's all possibilities at the same time. Once I put the password problem in my quantum computing chip box, it's all possibilities at the same time. When I take it out of the box, then it's the state it's in. And so you can look at the speed or position uncertainty and say, oh, if I tweak it the right way, then the password pops out. Right? If I measure the other thing, then the password comes out.
Well, let me walk away from the quantum physics for a moment, because I don't know if we're going to get me to the point where I understand that on this podcast, although that would be fun. I would enjoy that. But let me ask this question. So your point about even just password security as it relates to this type of computing becoming mainstream technology. We're not there yet, but you said, 5-year estimation. What do we do in the meantime? And what does Google need to do as good stewards of the technology in the meantime? So them as stewards of the technology, us as entrepreneurs, business owners, people in the space that want to have a positive impact, government, whatever the hell else, to properly prepare for what this type of technology can mean for security and identification. Because if what you're saying about what the technology is capable of doing now is true, then somebody that has access to it can really just assume whoever they want's identity through being able to it's the ultimate skeleton key in the way that you're describing it. So I'll reemphasize the question one more time, because I know I like to throw long ones, but it's this: Google as stewards of the technology and us as members of the economy on whole, whether it be entrepreneurs, individuals, or government, what do we need to do to be prepared for this going into the mainstream so there isn't high levels of chaotic activity related to it?
So I guess I'm going to, in part, I'm going to take a page out of Elon Musk's book of philosophies, in that you need some transparency. So you need it to be. You need to treat it like nuclear weapons. You need to say it could be really dangerous. Therefore, we need an oversight, not Google, to ensure that the civilization's interests are met. Because you hear the same thing with AI, which is falling flat with the current technology, but the future fear of the AI, what they call super intelligence. So if humans have an max IQ of say 200, and what we imagine AI to have a max IQ of 10,000, you can see how a 10,000 IQ existence would treat a 200 IQ as ants, right? Why would it even talk to us? It would just manipulate us as easy as could be. It's like the Matrix, right?
Yeah.
So 10,000 IQ AI says, well, how can I make these silly humans useful to me? Well, I'll manipulate them in this way, and then I'll get what I want. Whatever that is. I don't know what a 10,000 IQ AI would want. Maybe space travel, maybe, who knows, right? But I think coming back to Earth, the point of the quantum computing chip is not it's not the same threat as super intelligence AI, which is still science fiction today. The threat that we've talked about is so I guess if we back up on the positive side, there are problems that are unsolvable today because it's going to take too long, and this could be how do you do fusion energy, right? We have CERN doing particle physics without quantum computers, and they have just a phenomenal computer array. Essentially a machine that fills, a warehouse. I mean, it's just a huge sensor to do these particle physics. Well, when you have quantum computing, you could just simulate that, right? You kind of get the answer as soon as you ask the question.
Because the AI is running the test.
It's running 10,000 tasks in one task, right? It's running 1 trillion tasks in one task. So the answers just kind of pop out. So there's all kinds of, weather prediction. There's all kinds of intractable problems that are now solvable. But as with any tool, there's a dark side as well, which, now I can impersonate anybody. I can do deep fake AIs, just so much better. And because of the quantum computational bandwidth. I think there'll be some pitfalls as well that we understand. So right now we're projecting based on the mathematical formulas, we're projecting what could be done. In the press release that Google sent, they say they're currently working on error detection. Now, if you read into that what that means is that the quantum computing is not working as well as the theoretical. So maybe they're not going to get 1 trillion times. But hey, if they get 10,000 times, it's still super cute.
Let me hop in there because I think I just understood a really interesting point that you just made, and I want to reiterate it to make sure that I'm hanging with you. Because, man, you're like a track runner with this, and I'm like couch potato McGee trying to keep up with you. So I want to make sure that I'm hanging with you. So one thing that I learned about in some of the schooling that I did related to computer science was this idea of like capacity versus like what the actual bit rate is. And when you're marketing, you kind of lean into the thing that sounds kind of the best, whatever your optimized is. So what I think I'm hearing you say is Google's kind of like putting all these zeros there, and is like, this is like, if we nail it where everything goes right, we're able to kind of be this much quicker with this chip as like an optimized potential. But the reality is, and you're saying that there's some error checking they're doing and some optimizing they're doing. The reality is they're not going to get that level of efficiency, but it's still going to be tremendous, but it's not perfect. Am I understanding that?
Yeah, I'm reading between the lines in their press release.
Yeah.
Since they say they're working on error correction and they're happy to make strides in that, they have an error problem where they are not getting reliable answers out of the password question, say, right? They're getting bad passwords. They're getting passwords that are not really the password.
Sure.
And yet they are getting the password, right? So they've got enough. They have enough indications. Yeah, they have enough indication that it is working at a quantum level. And I mean, part of the point is NVIDIA has been making strides by simulating quantum computing with their GPUs. It's not quantum computing. It is massively parallel computing. And so what they're doing is they're taking the and see, that's, if you go back in the history of NVIDIA was a spinoff of SGI, where the hardware engineers had a split. They had a disagreement on their approach that they should go. And SGI went to the threaded CPU route of what we would think of the CPUs. And so the engineers that disagreed with him, if they were making a CPU, they made a massively parallel CPU. So instead of 2 cores, which is what SGI would have been working on, or 4 cores, they went 1,000 cores. And now I think the 5090 has more than 10,000 cores in it in an equivalent sense. And so the hardware engineers at what was to become NVIDIA made this other chip. Now, to find a use for it, they've said, well, this would work for graphic processing, because in graphic processing you have a lot. You could do 1 core per pixel on your screen.
Oh wow!
And so now, you hear about textures and display maps and so forth, and like the background that I have now. Right. So there is a GPU that's saying whatever's not moving is background. So replace it. Right. I'm getting a camera feed with what's actually behind me, goes into the GPU, and then it makes a calculation across all the pixels in a multi-threaded way and says background, not background. And not background shows in the foreground, and background, you see a brick wall. I guess the point of that, though, is that because NVIDIA has been building these data centers with GPUs, they've been able to take an application of their trillions of cores, if you will, and through their trillions of cores, they can simulate quantum computing. They're just doing it in parallel. So they essentially have the biggest supercomputer in the world, and it's organized GPU way instead of CPU way. So it's very free flowing on how they assign the processing. It's a sieve. CPUs. Where we talk about CPUs act as like a recipe where you do one instruction at a time. GPUs, like NVIDIA, they operate more as a sieve, where you organize all your data and then you let it drop through the sieve and you collect it at the bottom. Right? And in the video sense, here's all the pixels I want to display. They drop through the sieves, textures get applied, whatever they're doing, you have the result. And then you do that again, and you get 30 frames per second, you get 200 frames per second, and so on. So that's what the GPU is doing for graphics, where the CPU is, well, as long as we don't have memory contention, I can parallelize processing. But as soon as I have a memory content, part of what's happening at a CPU is there's a vigilant analysis of what data instructions are referencing. And if two threads are referencing the same data, one thread gets blocked until the other thread completes. And so that's part of the inefficiency of a CPU is that it's constantly checking for contention, and it's constantly crippling itself to avoid contention, where the GPU it doesn't care about contention. Everything flows through. Now, there are GPU, because they're using it for computation, modern GPUs have ways to avoid memory contentions, which slow it down similarly, but they've come at the other end of it. So they kind of have a data first approach to processing, where the CPU has instruction first. Okay, long story. Back to the Willow chip by Google and your other questions. And I wanted to get into the networking because we're going to see this a lot sooner when you're ready.
When you say the networking, let's run down that thread that you're talking about. And forgive me, some of this, first of all, I asked the audience to forgive me slightly because there's so much content here. Some of it I don't even know what to ask about because some of it is over my technical knowledge and to current knowledge, and to be able to know what's a thread that can get back to the conversation is slightly challenging for me in this one. So first of all, forgive me for that, because there's plenty in there that you just went through that deserves more diving into and deeper understanding. But I need to learn more is what the crux of that is. I would love, if you're excited to go down that thread that you're describing, let's do it and just explain a little bit before you go into the depth, what it is we're about to talk about and how it relates to Willow. I think you said the networking.
Yeah. Now, part of the point is that so quantum physics have been around since the 1950s, 1940s, some early in the 1930s. There are many quantum effects. The quantum computing chip they call a qubit. Instead of bits, they have qubits, and that plays into the uncertainty. So a bit is a 1 or a 0. A qubit, you don't know until you look at it, right? And so the challenge for the quantum computing
on a qubit.
Well, it's 1 or 0.
Oh, okay.
So you don't know whether it's 1 or 0 until you look at it. Right. And so if you will, we're back to the chip point. The secret behind the quantum computing chip is you have enough qubits to fit the password, right? So if you only have 1 qubit, it doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do you it does you 1
qubit's good.
1 qubit goodness. So maybe you double your computational speed, right? If you have 2 qubits, now you have 4 times. If you have 3 qubits, now you're 8 times, and so on, right? So to be useful in a practical sense, you need as many qubits as the problem you're trying to solve. Okay. Another aspect of quantum computing is what they call the Hall effect, and they've been using this since they've had transistors in the late 60s. They didn't know what it was. But the whole thing with semiconductors is what they call the Hall effect, and they call these the gates. And so when the current CPU does multiplication or addition, what it's doing is it's forcing the values of the register through logic gates. And the logic gates are on and off, and they do some computation, which is what electroengineering does, to organize the gates. So as the data in the register goes through the logic gates, out comes the problem, right? The solution. Now, what's happening in the logic gates is what they call a transistor, which is if it's off, the signal doesn't go through. And if it's on, the signal does go through. So this is, again, your ones and zeros. If the transistor's off, it doesn't matter what the data is. Nothing's going through. If the transistor's on, if the data's 0, 0 goes through. If the data's 1, 1 goes through. Now, the 1 goes through based on the Hall effect. And what the Hall effect is that even though you have a barrier where electrons can't pass, if above that barrier you have a voltage field, then through quantum physics, the electron passes through what it shouldn't pass through. It jumps to the other side. So again, they've been using that that has been in use since the 60s.
How is it that we can use things we don't understand, John? Or is it just that I don't understand it?
Well, and it's part of this 5-year thing that this is going to happen. Is there are things we don't understand, but people, engineers, if you will, and programmers do the same thing in logic. They know the goal they want to achieve, and then they muck with things, and then they see how that works. So the whole thing with the transistor was they were mucking with things. Oh, well, okay, let's go to the vacuum tube, right? The vacuum tubes were the transistors before transistors. The vacuum tubes are the analog version of transistors. So you have a vacuum and you have a coil, and if the coil is hot, then as an input comes into the vacuum tube on one side, it picks up the hot field, the hot glowy field of the vacuum, and in the vacuum, it transfers that energy with increased voltage, if you will, increased signal. A vacuum tube increases the signal, right? So you're playing the guitar and the microphone is picking up a signal. The microphone sends it to the vacuum tube lead. Inside the vacuum tube, a second lead powers the filament. The filament energizes the vacuum, and then the sink. So, the sound comes in, the signal comes into one side of the vacuum tube lead. The energy of the filament is transferred to the signal, and a amplified signal comes out the other end. So that's how a vacuum tube works, but it works in analog. And that's why, your audio snobs will do vacuum tube equipment, because they get a pure analog signal. Transistor does the same thing in digital, but you only get ones and zeros, and there's a threshold. So an analog signal comes into a transistor. If it's too low, 0 comes out, even though it's 0.3 or something like that. If it's above 0.5, and it could be way above, it comes out as 1. That's how your transistors work. You just get zeros and ones.
So it's like a probability, or it's like a sorting mechanism almost.
It's very similar to a sorting mechanism, or in an audio term, you'd have a high pass filter or low pass filter, right? Because you have that. Anyway. So your transistors now, that's where the clipping comes in the audio, right? It pops in clipping, because the transistor had to turn it to a 0 or a 1, and if it jumps, abruptly, you get a pop or a click, or you lose the audio because it just it was too weak to pass the ones and zeros.
So as that technology evolves, it gets better. So there's less popping and clicking, and that's why songs get like remastered with new technology.
Yeah, they get quote unquote remastered because in the old sense it's analog media, but in general what's happening is sophisticated algorithms are what are quote unquote remastering it or colorizing it, and then we leap to AI, where AI now colorizes it or remasters it because algorithmically they're just saying, oh, if you see a pop, recognize it as a pop, and here's how you smooth it out. Or if you see black and white and they wore brown suits in the day, depending on the color of square of gray, make it this brown. And then in the algorithm sense, you can have artistic license of all the ties should be red and all the dresses should be blue, those kinds of things. When you go to AI, then AI is pattern matching. So you just say, here's a movie I liked that's in color. Here's a movie that's black and white. Colorize the black and white movie according to the movie I liked. So just follow the pattern. And then you get some unpredictable stuff. But let's get back to quantum mechanics. So we talked about the Heisenberg uncertainty problem and measuring and the point of you have all possibilities at the same time. We've talked about the Hall effect, where because the transistor is quote unquote on, electrons go through, kind of like the vacuum tube. And if the transistor's off, it doesn't matter what the electron is, it's not going through. Now let's get to what they call quantum entanglement. And quantum entanglement's significant in our day-to-day lives because so mathematically the quantum algorithms work forward or backwards. So there's no sense of time. You can go backwards in time, you can go forwards in time. When you add entanglement, it's and this is theory, it's not, when you add entanglement, it gives a forward motion to time. And an example here is you have a glass of ice on your table next to you, right? And you have room temperature, which is above the melting point of ice. What makes the ice melt? And you can talk about Brownian motion. Brownian motion is where molecules crash into each other and they transfer temperature, right? So a high temperature, high vibrational molecule crashes into the water molecule that's frozen and it transfers some heat, right? But you can also talk about quantum entanglement. Now, the point of quantum entanglement is when two particles become entangled, they operate the same way. So they don't have to crash into each other. When an electron in a molecule of ice gets entangled with an electron in a molecule of oxygen, all of a sudden those two molecules have to vibrate the same because they're quote unquote entangled, which would change the temperature of that molecule of ice. So over time, through entanglement, the ice can melt and it's not going to go backwards. That's where you get a forward motion of time. Okay, so let's go back to quantum networking, which is well ahead of quantum computing. So you have a wire between 2 points. Now, if you can entangle an electron, so now you have 2 electrons, right? And they're entangled. And you move one electron down the wire and preserves its entanglement, right? Now, in electricity and copper travels at 1/3 the speed of light.
When you say preserves its entanglement, does that mean that it could become disentangled? In quantum?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Can you just
Yeah,
keep
and
going?
you would
I just
just
wanted to make sure I understood.
you treat that as a loss, right? I'm going to send 10 down the wire and 8 make it. Okay, that's fine, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to send 10 more and 8 more make it, and now I've got my 10 that I needed, and the rest I throw away. So it travels down the wire at 1/3 the speed of light. Okay, but now that it's entangled, I can read the entanglement, and now it's happening instantaneously.
But why is it happening instantaneously?
Because the electrons are entangled. So because the 2 electrons are entangled, if I push one and turn it to 0, the other one turns to 0. If I push one and turn it to 1, the other one at the other end turns to 1. They are entangled.
And
They have to operate in all physics characteristics exactly the same.
Oh, well. And because you pushed it down the line in time.
I physically transferred it.
Okay.
In its entangled state. So
Yep.
I had 2, they were entangled close together.
Yep.
I moved the one to the other end. If it remained entangled, all of a sudden communication is instantaneous. I'm not penalized by the 1/3 speed of light. Now let's go to Wall Street, right? So Wall Street firms bought up real estate as close to the
We're going all over the place in this one.
Yeah, but I mean, here's a physical problem, right?
Yeah.
So Wall Street firms got as close to the New York stock market as they could because that 1/3 speed of light meant that they got the trade before somebody a block away got the trade.
And that's
But
why
if you're
that area is expensive to live.
Right. But if you have quantum entangled networking, I could be in LA and I could send the buy signal to New York Stock Exchange instantaneously. And I could receive the New York Stock Exchange price changes instantaneously. That's quantum computing in the network sense, not in the Heisenberg uncertainty principle sense. And you can see how concrete that is.
Sure.
Right? It still takes me, half a second to move an entangled bit to New York Stock Exchange from New York.
Yeah.
On a good day, right?
Yeah.
But for what I need it, once it's there, for what I need it to do, it's instantaneous, and I don't have the physical problem of latency.
So
I have zero latency, I guess is the point.
I think I see where this is going. You keep going though, because I don't want to say it and sound like a I'll say it on a phone.
I think I painted the picture. I've painted the picture. Quantum networking is it's happening right now.
So how does that relate to Willow? Let's tie that back to Willow. I won't make wild presumptions about what you just described means for the future, but we'll talk about now because I think that's probably what people are. You and I can get into the theory because I want to get into the theory. But tell me,
it goes back to your practical thing of how do we address this? And part of my point is this quantum stuff's going to come at us from multiple different avenues, networking being one of them. So we're going to be blindsided. What my point is, in part, is we're going to be blindsided by networking because it's going to happen, and it's going to be way cool. And in particular cases, it will be worthwhile. And see, here's another point of the quantum networking. We talk about secrecy of communications, right? Well, if you had 2 phones and you quantum networked the 2 phones, well, now you can have chat and voice communications without any networking. This isn't Wi-Fi. So now you have some assurance of secrecy because you've quantum entangled 2 phones. See, that's going to happen soon. That's going to happen sooner than quantum computing.
Can you tie? So you talked about quantum networking. You talked about quantum entanglement to explain the quantum networking, and then you also talked about some stuff with transistors. And I'm starting to
the Hall effect, which you don't have to worry about because we're that is
not
so
gonna be on the
mainstream. We don't even talk about it, right?
So we talked about some of those things in terms of how we got to the technology that we're using and some of the like how behind the physics of what's happening with Willow. And obviously there's a lot of like, holy moly, what does that mean going on there? But talk a little bit about how the quantum networking and that quantum entanglement relates to Willow. Like, let's just tie it all the way back to Willow. And then I don't know if you have a hard stop at the end of the hour, but I've not got a hard stop, and I've got a shit ton of questions for you that I'm sure would be valuable to go on to the YouTube
let's do this. Let's finish this session at an hour and start a new one. Like it won't be scheduled, but it could be in part of the archive.
Yeah, we can.
If you think that would be interesting,
I would. Do you have to stop?
Yeah, I have a stop at in like 3 hours. So
let's just keep rolling. Can we keep rolling? Is that okay?
It's your show.
It won't stop us or anything.
Okay.
Let's draw that point, and I'm just going to ask you questions until you and I are tired of talking to each other, if that's okay with you.
Okay, so here's I'm going to do a hybrid link back to the Willow chip from Google. Today they have what they call a TPM, a trusted platform module. I probably have the acronym wrong, but it's essentially a cryptography chip that goes in all system boards. You can't buy a server any longer that doesn't have a TPM chip. And operating systems like Microsoft Server, Windows Server, require a TPM chip to run. And then it uses it for password protection and fingerprint analysis and things like this. So you get secrets guarded by your trusted platform module. This quantum networking will become a chip like that. And that's where your two phones can sync and transfer entangled electrons. And now they're quote unquote networked together regardless of the distance, right? So just like you have a TPM chip now, you're going to have an entangled network chip in computers in the future. And as long as you have a mechanism to transport entangled electrons between two chips, you now have instant networking, and you don't have Wi-Fi pollution, you don't have 5G pollution, you don't have any of that, right? Okay, now back to Google and IBM, who are now, I think this is a shot across the bow for.
That's what the Willow's chip does that transferring. No,
Willow's chip does not do that. So Willow's chip
would need something.
It is not based on entanglement. Willow's chip is based on uncertainty.
Well, I'm certainly right now based on uncertainty. What does that mean?
So we talked about the three effects. We started with uncertainty, went to the Hall effect, and went to entanglement.
Okay, yeah.
So do that. And I'm just putting those as quantum technologies that are coming forward, that are here, that are coming forward, and that are further down the line. So the uncertainty is further down the line, and its application is different. The application is different, and it's how we get it is going to be different. So IBM is showing quantum computing.
Uncertainty is our boy Schrodinger.
Uncertainty is boy Schrodinger. It's the cat. It's whether the cat is alive or dead.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with you. Now I feel good about the past hour of conversation. Like I have an idea what's happening. Keep going, John. Thank you for letting me continue to interrupt.
No, it's not a problem. So so what IBM and Google are doing is they are racing to a point where they can sell quantum qubits, which are based on the uncertainty principle. And IBM's current technology, because they kind of have the big lab approach, so their current technology is based on supercooling. Because what happens is, as you reduce the temperature of matter, it becomes more susceptible to quantum effects. So this is where you have
another reason for your cold shower.
Yeah. Like you have the magnetic levitating trains. You've heard of that, right?
Sure. Yeah, I have.
And so if they can, and this is where superconductors come in, because if you can have a superconductor, which is a superconductor, so this is a fourth quantum effect. So superconductors are where electrons can move without resistance. So the reason why electrons in a copper wire move at 1/3 the speed of light is because of resistance. And if you put too many electrons in a copper wire, it gets too hot and things catch on fire. Right? So that's the dance we play with the physical world with electrons. Now, when you have a superconducting element, I shouldn't say element, I should say molecule. When you have when you have this brick where electrons can transfer without resistance, now you can do what they call superconducting. You can turn that into a magnet, right? You can wrap it around a coil, and now you have a magnet with no resistance. So it takes very little energy, and it has absurdly high magnetism. Now you can lift a train with a brick-sized superconducting magnet. Today's technology requires a superconducting magnet to be cooled like halfway to nitrogen, 70, minus 72 or minus 92. I should look it up. But it's above the liquid point of nitrogen, which makes it convenient because you only have to cool nitrogen. You send it down the wires. It doesn't have to be perfect. You have some leftover nitrogen air in your pipes. So from a physical standpoint, it's still expensive to cool nitrogen down to liquid, but it makes the solution practical. Okay, so if you can do superconducting at room temperature, which they can't do yet, then you can build your computer equipment after superconducting principles, which again have very little latency. Now your electrons can travel at the speed of light, and they're not going to heat things up, right? So you don't have to worry about the CPU temperature, the GPU temperature. Okay, we're not there yet. I don't think even people are talking about it doing. They're talking about the liquid nitrogen cooled ones. Okay, so where was that going? IBM's current quantum technology requires the temperature to be lowered so that the quantum effects are more easy to exhibit. And that's in part that makes it impractical, but large companies and small governments could buy this. And so then they could use this quantum technology from IBM to crack passwords or do whatever they wanted to do with it. It still makes it a limited resource. Part of what it looks like Google's doing is they're headed to room temperature and they're headed to mass adoption.
Okay. So they took two different pathways with their quantum technology.
Right. And part of the reason, this is more on a hunch, part of the reason I went into the entanglement discussion is I suspect that what the Google hardware engineers are doing is more along the lines of entanglement and Hall effect things than an actual Schrodinger's box.
So so let me just see if I'm with you. Again, you're like Forrest Gump running way, and I'm like trying to follow you through the desert. So you're saying that IBM has taken more of the Schrodinger approach.
Yes, they're absolutely taking the Schrodinger's approach, and they have to supercool it to maintain the viability of the Schrodinger's box.
And the reason that is because they have to process every possible outcome.
Well, that's the benefit they get from preserving Schrodinger's box. If Schrodinger's box degrades, they lose the bit.
And they can only
the uncertainty.
They can only maintain it with cooling the everything that's doing all the
machine, right?
So that it can maintain the
CPU, which is about the size of an air conditioner, has to be cooled. And so you from a human scale,
it takes a lot of energy to cool it, I imagine. I bet it's hot.
Yeah, it does. Right. Yeah, well, because you've got to go down to liquid nitrogen levels of temperatures. And in IBM's case, you can see in fact, I do have here's an image. Let me shrink this down. Let's see. As we're talking. Oh, oops, hang on. They have all these paywalls and so forth, but
no problem. I just feel good that I'm starting to have a freaking idea of what's happening in the conversation. In the first part, that first hour there, about halfway through, I was like, "This one's tough. This one's tough."
Okay, so it's not a great photo, but
let me get this freaking
a little bit.
Let me get this.
Okay, this picture right here is IBM's quantum computer.
Okay.
And you can see how it's a physical device. All this would be in nitrogen, liquid nitrogen. So it'd be immersed in liquid nitrogen. And then above this ring is the leads in and out, right?
Over here okay. Yep. Don't get lost like I did and try to figure out what the hell John was clicking on the generative edits on stuff. He's over there. Is that copper or what?
No,
gotta be copper.
It probably is copper. It doesn't necessarily matter because the qubit is inside the tube.
Oh, okay.
And so you can see that this IBM device has 1 qubit per tube.
How can you see that?
Well, I guess that's. I guess I'm making that's the point. Is that the Schrodinger box, if you will, is the tube. So each qubit of uncertainty is physically 1 tube.
Okay.
And
so that's how many parallel boxes it can solve at once. The number.
Yeah, this is the size of the password it can guess at the same time.
Okay, and that's the way IBM has approached it, which is Schrodinger style, which is we're going to guess everything all at once.
Yes.
Okay, I'm with you.
All right, I'm going to until I find a better graphic. Okay, so on I don't know that that Google doesn't require supercooling. I'm reading between the lines a little bit. I'm suspecting they don't. And with other research that I've seen, particularly the quantum networking, they don't require supercomputing. But the measurement's different. They don't have a Schrodinger box per se. What they have is a container to keep a single electron in, right? So they get the entangled electrons.
Okay.
They put it in a like a Hall effect container that they can do in silicon right now, as if it were a transistor. And then once it's transferred, they do a test of whether it's good or not.
Whether
They have
whether
some
it
agreed
maintained the network, the quantum network, the quantum connection.
entanglement or not, right?
Yep. Okay.
And if
So
if it's not entangled, they flush it and wait for the next candidate that was physically transported down the copper wire. If it is entangled, they keep it and add it to the number of good bits. So my guess is that the Google engineers, because Google has a lot of money, IBM has a lot of money,
yeah.
but Google probably has more money than IBM now. and to some, I wouldn't be surprised if Google scouted IBM engineers that were trying to go a different direction than the supercooling that IBM was going. Just like the NVIDIA and the SGI. Why not take that opportunity?
Yeah. Well, why waste the resource? And
right.
What a motivated resource I bet they were.
Right. And if you look at the Hall effect is well understood. It's used in silicon all the time. So if all you need is a reservoir that's stable at room temperature, whatever you put in the reservoir, if you can put electrons in the reservoir, it can now serve. So I guess I've made a path around. If you took a quantum entangled network engineer, and you paired them with a Hall effect engineer, and maybe somebody that knew what IBM was doing, could you make a room temperature Schrodinger's box? And that's my guess.
That's your guess on what's going on with Willow.
With
the how. The how. Okay.
Yeah, the how.
Okay. Good Lord.
And so now you have so you looked at IBM with their tubes, and they have a machine that you have to have a minivan. You have the core of a machine. I mean, I don't know the whole machine's probably a semi truck, a short bed semi truck.
And all the rest.
Yeah. And now you have research in, here's a silicon chip that's able to have a Schrodinger's box container. And then you listen to Google's thing where they say, we've got a big problem with air detection. Well, that means the Schrodinger's boxes are dissolving.
They're overheating. They're losing stability
and it's no longer uncertain. And so they have to take one of two approaches. They have to change the hardware to make a better box. Maybe they'll cool them down. Maybe they will cool them down, or they add more boxes. A typical approach is just
like a core.
I need 100 boxes to work. I've got 1,000 boxes. Right.
So that some of them can fail, so that some of the electrons can.
Well, fail. And they do this with modern chips today, right? Modern chips, are all the full capacity chips. And then they test them and they say, oh, only half of this works. So this is not an 8-core, this is a 4-core. Right? Hardware wise, it's an 18-core chip or a 24-core chip. They goes to testing and they can only rely on half of them. They burn it. They may or may not burn out the ones, but they designate the ones that don't work as unusable. And so they manufactured a 24-core chip. They tested and said, we'll sell this as a 12-core chip.
I understand.
So I mean, that's happening now.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you see NVIDIA come out with They have the 4090, so that's everything works up to spec. The 4080, it works at 75% of the spec. It's a 4090 chip. Yeah. It's the same chip.
Similar.
They just said.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they just said this much of it doesn't work. We've turned those circuits off, so we only have the circuits. Right, we only have the circuits that work. It's a 4080, not a 4090. We're still selling it. It's a 47, which is 25% capacity. We're still selling it. Right. And then marketing wise, they say, we're not going to sell the 8% chips. That's not worth it. Excuse me while I push the cough dump button.
Yeah. Do your cough and take a sip of water. And then I've got a question for you after you've taken care of yourself. And I guess I can ask it while you're so IBM and Google, and I imagine there are potentially and probably other organizations that have considered are working on this already. Google made a large enough breakthrough with Willow to be able to publicize it, and IBM is not as far as Google. Is that a safe way to?
No, I think IBM's farther than Google. Okay. IBM's farther than Google, but the hardware is much more expensive to buy and operate.
So the reason that it is such tremendous mainstream news is because of its potential application for everyday and common person use. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. This would have been the first. Willow is the first time for, I think, very, very, very many people where they presented with, hey, this is what's possible with quantum mechanics as it relates to artificial intelligence. And here's a huge breakthrough. Because IBM's, to your point much earlier on, was primarily based on major organizations that can afford to pay for that type of technology and, other governments and all the rest of that stuff.
Right. And IBM's doing the safe science, right? What's everything we know? Let's tweak one variable. What's everything we know? Let's tweak one more variable, right? So we know nitrogen cooled supercomputers. Let's do that. Let's start there.
Right.
And I think Google is, we can't do a Me Too.
Yeah, you don't want to do one of those.
Yeah. How do we leapfrog them? Can we do 5 variables? Can we do something that's room temperature, right? Can we look around and look at these quantum things that we're doing now and apply them differently?
And it probably has what their breakthrough, you believe, within the next 5 years will have repercussions on the everyday use of massive AI systems, massively powerful AI systems for the everyday you and me.
Yeah, but the reason is a little bit different than what you were speculating.
Okay.
The reason is that general computing, all problems become solved much more quickly. All problems are quicker. AI being one of the problems. And AI has 2 sides to it. There's the training side, which requires huge amounts of data.
And can I cut in right there? Huge amounts. Yeah. So I was talking to somebody yesterday about what I think the potential future of artificial intelligence in training is. But so one thing you just said was it requires huge amounts of data. But the other thing, if you want to train something properly, it requires continuous data. Because what is effective in the world is always changing. And what is needed is always changing to a degree.
Well, yeah. Yes and no. So for example, ChatGPT was initially trained on New York Times. They're getting sued over it. So they're trying not to admit it. New York Times, Shakespeare, right?
Yeah.
So it was initially trained. And so when you initially asked ChatGPT a question, you got a New York Times editor's answer. Yeah. Now, because and I don't believe they should have done anything different, because they've started folding in results, like you're saying, the constant training into subsequent models. You're not getting New York Times editor stuff any longer. Yeah. You're starting to get, your high school teacher stuff. So it's still good. It's still astoundingly recognized as matching human speech, right? The Turing test. It's astounding that way. It may be better than your high school teacher. So you're still leveraging the benefits, but it's degraded in certain measurements, right? It's better in some and it's worse in others. Right. Additionally, if the reason this model came in where they recurse the data is the AI that trained to play games like Go or Dota or League of Legends or some of the other strategic but real-time games. When they first did it, it would do a losing move and then feed that back in and not do that move, right? That's a bad pattern.
Right.
And so over time,
yeah,
the training over time by recursing or regurgitating the past into the future model in a game playing sense, it strengthens the model. And I would agree. Like if we're doing a pizza delivery thing, we want to learn over time.
Yeah.
Right. We want to learn, it's Friday the 13th is a heavier day.
It's snowing.
We don't want to be surprised on that. It's right. And so the quote, we want to, in most cases, in a business sense, you want to penalize the bad choices much more than rewarding the good choices. You still reward the good choices. It's all probability, right? The model is all probability.
So you want to be taking as much, like, my point with training is just that it's not a train and done. It's a train, and then you still need, and we're on a tangent here, but I'm going to take it because I think it's really important. So one thing that I learned when I was working with corporate Domino's is this idea that you need a training ground to be able to come to an initial understanding, but B, an adaptive understanding. And what I mean by an adaptive understanding is like the state of the game is going to change, and you need an arena to be able to measure what is and is not best practice. And you're going to see models get trained, and then they're going to go out in the world, and then the world is going to change around them. And unless every model is trained on how to take feedback and adapt from what's happening around them, which wouldn't be efficient from an energy perspective, what's more efficient is making really isolated and specific models that go and do something really reliable. Right. So not putting in there all of this like ability to conceptualize and consider, is this bad information? Is this a good source? Like, no, you're going to need people to do that, to have really efficient models, or models that are designed to do that type of feedbacking. And then it's going to have to constantly be feeding into that probability matrix of what is exactly the right behavior. But if you do it at a point in time and then don't ever give it any more information, then it's only going to be what the right thing was at that point in time. And you don't know what.
Yeah, but that's a key point as well that you pointed out, which I believe you're going to have smaller, practical, special purpose practical models than one big model that does everything. So you, as a business that you're starting out, you may use ChatGPT or Hugging Face to initially get started. And then at some point, you're going to want to have specific special purpose models for certain things.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I derailed you. You said training, and I did anytime somebody says training, I get
Well,
excited.
the
So
two sides to, the two sides to AI is the training side,
Yep.
which doesn't have to happen in real time and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
It typically requires large amounts of data, even if it's feeding back in. And then the playback side. So the playback side has to happen in real time, but it is quote unquote playing the model, and it's significant to recognize models can be played in reverse. They can be played forward as well as backwards.
Okay.
And I'll get to an example of that
Good.
in a minute. But the point is that the hardware to play a model does not have to be as beefy as the hardware to train a model. So if you do beefy hardware to train the model, you save time. If you're a company that doesn't have the resources then you still train the model. It just takes a month instead of a week. Right. And so now you're just playing practical games of how, when do I need the model? When do I need the changes? Right. When do I need the improvement? If I can wait a month, I don't spend as much on training resources. If I can't wait a month, I rent the NVIDIA solution and I go to town and I get it in a couple of days. Right. I get the model back. Now on the playback side, and this is like if we use dominoes, if we pick on dominoes, projecting customer orders and so forth, or or the kitchen inventory, or the cook times because humidity changes, all those kinds of things.
Wow. Your pizza
I don't need a beefy
It's going to have to cook at a different time than your pizza in Fart Lauderdale.
Absolutely. Well, and if it's cold and overcast and humid versus dry and hot, some things changes. And to get that perfect pizza, as well as travel time, right? So you want it to arrive hot. You've got the special containers, not just warming. Maybe
I got to
finish cooking on the way.
Some people.
Right. You cook it on the way, but now you're using AI to say, here's the difference. Here's the current traffic conditions.
Oh, wow.
Here's where we want to get it. Right. So it's all pattern matching. It's all your model. And if you're wrong, you reflect that back into the model saying, you didn't give it, I would rather look at a little longer than a little shorter. Right.
Yeah.
So you punish the model for getting it wrong. Anyway, that's all local. That's all that. It's that storefront's AI. And it doesn't necessarily need a big supercomputer to run it. Just an NVIDIA GPU would suffice. Right. So now you have a desktop computer running the site and doing all this AI benefits. And yet, if it needs remodeling, that goes to corporate.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. That makes a ton of sense. If you have any other points on that, or if you have something jumping at you, because I've got a list
of your next question.
I got freaking questions for you. Let me take a look. So we talked about, this one's freaking interesting. And some of these, like I said, when we get tired out, don't feel obligated to keep right. As long as you're enjoying the convo, feel like you can be honest. So people have talked about Willow, and I'm saying people because I don't know enough to be somebody that is saying that I think one way or the other. But people have expressed that Willow's ability to process potential outcomes is an indicator that alternate dimensions is a reality. Is that just crazy talk, or is it crazy talk, Is it people that don't actually understand the technology, or is this technology indicating some interesting potential realities of the structure of reality?
Okay. You and I, as analog humans, live in a three-dimensional world. Our brains are hardwired to understand things in three dimensionals. The mathematics, here's kind of an odd thing. The mathematics of 4 dimensions and 5 dimensions up to 8 dimensions is hard. But above 8 dimensions, the mathematics of dimensions above 8 becomes easy again. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's so abstract that it makes make math easier to understand. Now, we talk about 3 dimensions. You're familiar with the Rubik's Cube?
Oh, I've seen the bad boy. I don't know if I've ever finished one, but I definitely have spun it around and gotten frustrated.
Yeah. Well, so a little 2x2 Rubik's Cube.
I feel like I could figure out the 2x2. I don't know about that 3x3 though. The 2x2 looks a lot less scary than that 3x3.
So there's essentially 3. Well, there's 2 ways to figure it out. There's one way is not to figure it out, right?
Yeah, that's the one I do.
just random, and hope that it works and not know. There's a formulaic way where you're not really looking at the cube. I mean, you look at the pattern.
I was about to make a goofy joke. Keep going. Don't let me be. Don't let me.
Right. So, I mean, it relates to math in a minute, right? So, you could look at this and say, "Oh, I want the white to line up. So I just have to turn it this way." There, I'm solved. Right? Rubik's invented this because he wanted his math students to think in 3 dimensions.
Okay.
Right? Visually, they wanted to think in 3 dimensions. So you can solve this by 3-dimensional thinking.
Okay.
Now the other way, which most people take, is essentially translation tables. So when you see a certain pattern, you say, "Oh, I do twist, 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 untwist," and then it's solved. So it's formulaic.
Right.
It's not visual.
Yeah, and they're not actually using the space. They're using the equation.
They're using equations.
They don't have the. Okay, I'm with you. Keep going.
Now, and myself included, I actually solve it formulaically. I enjoy understanding it visually, but that's too slow.
Right. Yeah. Well, you've solved it already. You know what I mean? It's the difference between somebody that's like playing a Legend of Zelda game for the first time and somebody that's played it 10 times. It's like,
yeah,
if you've solved it, then you just do. You don't have to be like, well, where's the key? You just go to where the key is.
Okay,
you gotta play a Zelda game if you haven't, because it seemed like you didn't get that reference. You'd freaking love it. You would love it.
No. In my downtime, I've actually been playing Zelda's Breath of the Wild, which we bought for the young kids so long ago. But it's fascinating, the breadth of the game.
Is that your first time ever playing a Zelda game?
No.
We'll talk about that.
Man. I never played them seriously. I mean, this one I actually am playing a little more serious, which I'm.
Oh, I see.
I have you gain your game playing skills at 12 years old, right? For males. So at 12 years old, we had Pong. So my game playing skill is turning a dial.
I know what you mean. I tried to play like Final Fantasy 15 or something recently because I loved I like Final Fantasy like 7, 8, 9, 10 were a lot of fun for me. But the like way combat is just I'm so overwhelmed. It's too fast because the original was turn based. So I know what you mean. I do understand
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so my nephew barely watches. He's disgusted with how I play Zelda because he's like, "You're so dumb. You're such a loser at this game."
You got to tell him to be
yeah.
more friendly with his communication. But I'm sure I get what you mean. He's frustrated watching you.
It's right. It's frustrating. Like I'm essentially doing the farm.
It'd be you watching me trying to figure out a Rubik's Cube. You'd be like, this guy, he
exactly. Hey, hurry up. Move. Let me do this. Anyway, so let's get back to the mathematics. So we're kind of steeped. And part of the reason I bring up the Rubik's Cube is because it's a 3-dimensional puzzle. But with computer simulation, they've turned it, there is a 4-dimensional Rubik's Cube.
Oh, that would really give me a hard time.
Oh. Yeah.
You gotta share it. Put it on the screen here.
Okay. Let me find it.
Because I can't even conceptualize the damn thing. I just keep trying to think of it, and I just keep imagining a Rubik's Cube, the 3D version.
Let's see.
I have a knot in my back, and it is driving me bananas.
Well, yeah, stand up if you need to.
Well, I might just swing my neck around a little bit. Oh, fuck it.
See, I've actually played the... Let's see. This one, it doesn't match. It's close, but it doesn't match. I'll do a SketchUp thing and.
Well, anyway, okay, perfect.
And do a thought experiment with you.
Good God.
So here's the way they imagine it, right? Let's see. Let me load an app, and we'll come. Okay, there's a book, and it's an open domain. It's an open domain book, and it is called Flatland. And I actually find it a hilarious book. Hilarious.
Does it feature my boy Flat Stanley?
No.
You know about Flat Stanley?
I don't. All right, let's get... Okay, so in Flatland, the narrative of Flatland is you have this 2-dimensional world of shapes, and it's politically incorrect because
me and Flatland have some things in common sometimes.
It's part of the hilarity. It's part of the hilarity, and we will get banned by YouTube if I go into it too aggressively.
Okay.
But what they do is they say in Flatland, your intelligence is based on the number of sides that you have.
Mm.
So if you have and so some members of society are just a single line segment. And because they are invisible from a certain direction, they are required to waddle. Let's see if I should be able to. And then your soldiers are. Let's see.
I'm gonna send you a.
I need a better. I'm failing because I loaded an app I'm not familiar with.
I can see why that would be a problem.
So let's try this again. Because I actually do want to show. I do want to show something.
I want to see it. I'm not in any kind of rush. Everything I've got left to accomplish this week can be accomplished in the time left this week. So this is exciting. And you only have something like Willow get announced how often? How many? Once every how many trillion years, John?
I know, exactly. Okay. Here we go. Let's see if I can rock this one. Share the screen.
Oh, share one more time. I misclicked. Thanks.
Okay, don't need that. I should probably okay. So in flatland, they require let me make that a little bit thicker, but in flatland, they require line segments to waddle if your viewpoint is if your viewpoint is straight on. They are dangerous if they waddle because they can pierce you, right?
Sure. Like, yeah.
So line segments are considered the least IQ intelligence, right?
They can bang into you and hurt you without even knowing what they're doing, huh?
Yeah, they just pop you.
I've met some fools like that.
Right. Now,
I know some cats like that.
Soldiers are triangles because they have a point and they can hurt people, but you can still see them, and they're the least intelligence, right? And so
like a brawny dude at the gym.
Yeah. So if you're a square, you're more intelligence than a triangle, and if you're everything's polygon, so they wouldn't have a star, but they'd have a pentagram, a pentagon, a hexagon, and so on.
The young dodecahedron. I was really excited.
Yeah, you're just more intelligent, and then in a certain sense, you want to, your circle is the highest intelligence, and it doesn't exist. Okay, so here's kind of the point of flatland. So a three-dimensional object comes into flatland, right? A three-dimensional object.
Yeah.
But from say a sphere. But from flatland's perspective, it just looks like a circle that changes its surface.
Okay.
Right? A sphere in flatland is unintelligible. Or it's the elephant thing, right? You have 13 blind yogis, and they all touch an elephant. And one says, "Oh well, an elephant is like a snake because he's touching the trunk," and another one says, "No, it's kind of a hard, piercing sphere because it's touching the tusk," and then it's like parchment paper because it's the fold of the ear, and so on, right? So each perspective is different. So in flatland, the sphere that comes into flatland is just intelligent as a circle, and it's so weird.
Yes,
Now,
so much of it isn't recognized.
Right, and now I guess I'll do it as the star. Right, the priest class of Flatland is afraid. They are in charge of their religion, and they're very worried about every 100 years a square will start spouting such nonsense as 3-dimension crap. Right? They have two-dimensional.
Wait, is Flatland real, or are you trying to make a point? Keep going. Don't answer my question because they're gonna take me off YouTube. Keep going, John.
Read the original 1800s version. Do not read the modernized, politically correctized version.
Dude, I knew I liked you.
Okay, so every 100 years or so, and let me draw something. Okay, so let's say that this is this guy's house, right?
Who's
this
guy?
square lives in a house, and the bedrooms are pretty simple because from Flatland's perspective, you can't see around the house, right? So every 100 years, a square who lives in the house and has comfortable furniture starts spouting 3-dimensional nonsense. And the priest class exists to keep people in orthodoxy, right? Keep people in the conventional wisdom of 2-dimensional mathematics and 2-dimensional existence, and line segments have to waddle because it's so dangerous. They just right. Pierce things.
There's no way they could learn the line segments.
Right.
Or maybe if you put a bunch of line segments together, do they make anything if you get a bunch of line segments together?
Well, I'll come back to that.
You could lean a couple line segments up to each other and make a triangle.
Well, but in Flatland, these polygons are all existences.
I know.
Anyway, and maybe you've discovered what the birth rate is. If you take lines and move them together, then you get a new entity.
Maybe.
Okay, so this sphere comes into Flatland and picks up a square, and from a 3rd-dimensional perspective shows the square Flatland. And the square is like amazed and says, "That's my house, and I can see into my house. I can see through walls. This existence is crazy." And the square comes back to Flatland. And the priests immediately try to kill him because that's what religions do, is they kill new perspectives. They keep you in orthodoxy, right?
In Flatland.
And he's like, no, yeah, in Flatland. So the square is like, no, I have a new way to construct Flatland, and my house has an inside that is perceptible from a different dimension, right? And he's doing all these heresies, these Flatland heresies. And the sphere comes back and talks to tease the square some more. Yeah. And the square says, "Oh, it's so wonderful. You've opened my horizons to 3 dimensions, and it's wonderful. And I want you to show me 4 dimensions. I want you to show me the inside of you, like you showed the inside of my house. I want you." Yeah. And the sphere is like, "That is heresy. There's only 3 dimensions." And the sphere comes back. This is the spoiler. You should still read Flatland because it's.
Here, let me
I'm going to go through it, so you don't need to read it. But the sphere comes back and says, "You're right. If a 4-dimensional being came into my 3 dimensions and pulled me out of it, so I was aware, then of course you could see the inside of the sphere," and so on. Right. Okay, so let's get to the money thing.
The money thing?
No.
What are we getting?
Select all. Okay, so if you have a point, right? I'm going to inexpertly draw a point, right?
Okay.
If you have a point, it would be considered 0 dimensions, even though it exists,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
So it has one vertex. It has no length, right?
Yeah.
If you drag a point along, I'm doing it inexpertly, so let me do this expertly. Let's see. Well, I guess I'm going to do it inexpertly. If you drag a point, it becomes a line. And as a line, it has 2 vertices, right? So text vx2, right? When I add a dimension, I get twice as many vertexes.
Okay.
Okay, now let's say
I remember this.
now I'm going to slide this line in another dimension. So sorry, this is D0, right? This is down a little bit more. Well, this is D1, right?
Okay.
So D2. So I am going to slide the line in another direction, and I get a square.
Yeah.
So my vertices times 2 go to 4, and my sides, if you will, go to 4 as well.
Sure.
Right. So I've introduced a new metric here. Edges x4.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's our square
So
buddy
now,
Flatland. I recognize him. He's more of a
Yeah.
rectangle here, but I recognize him.
so now let's do D3, right? So D3 is a cube, which this one actually, let's see. I started wrong, so let's delete this. But isn't that cool? This has cube stuff.
Yeah, this is nuts. I can't wait to see where this goes, honestly.
Okay, so here's cube. Let me
I imagine
move it.
where it goes are those lines off into the.
Okay, so how many vertices do I have? Well, I have to do times 2, so I have 8 vertices.
Yeah. Wait.
Right?
Yeah.
D8. And how many edges do I have? I have to multiply by 4, so I have 16. Is that true? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's 12.
Yeah.
So I have 12 edges.
Because they share one. Each of them share one.
So what's my formula? 1 to 4 to 12. 4, 8, 12. And then the other thing I have is sides, right? So in 0 dimensions, I only have a point. In 1 dimension, I have an edge, right? In let's see. So V2 edge 1. Let's delete that. This has I like this tool, but I'm not used to it either.
It is all good, man. We are on no
D4.
Usually, this thing exists within a time limit, and now that we're outside of that,
Okay, so what's added to I now have surfaces, right? I have 6 surfaces, 8 vertices. So the vertices are times 2.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So now the problem is taking the flatland example. So what is D4? Now in school you have falsely learned that time adds the 4th dimension, but time does not add the 4th dimension, because when you add time, you don't double the vertices, right? What we know from this formula is the vertices have to go to 16.
Yeah, to get another dimension. Well, what's the equation
Yeah.
for the edges?
See, I'm gonna guess 3 times.
No, it can't be. It can't be, because 1 times 3 isn't 4. It looks like it's maybe double. No.
I'm gonna guess times 3. Because here's the point.
I see why you're guessing times 3, because there weren't the sides and the vertices and the edges don't present until certain starting points, and D1 would be an edge starting point, because D0 is 0 for, well, it's 1 for vertices, but it's 0 for edges.
Oh yeah. So the metric, I'm just guessing 36. And then what about your surfaces?
Oh heavens.
Here's the point. Here's the point. You saw how we did the sliding trick, right? You had a point, you slided it in 1 dimension, you get 1 dimension. You have a line, you slide it in a 2nd dimension, you have 2 dimensions. You have a square, you slide it in 3 dimensions, you get 3 dimensions. How do you slide the box into the 4th dimension? Using a third dimension vector, right? So in each case, I used a vector to slide, right? Yeah. In the D1 case, I slid it in this direction. Then I slid the whole option in this, and so on. As humans, we think in 3 dimensions. Where do I slide?
Is it like diagonally out?
All at once.
Right. Each one of the vectors needs to expand outward and inward. Is that right?
Yes. And here's how some scientists. Let me. I think I can find this.
I'm freaking pumped about this. This is the first. This is neat.
Okay. So I'll share this screen, because even though it's hard to read, it makes the point in incredible. Oh, let's see. Okay. This gives you incredible, mind-blowing. So this is a human.
Good. Yeah, tesseract. Okay. I see.
Yeah, this is a human interpretation of mapping 4 dimensions into 3 dimensions into 2 dimensions, right? Because I have a 2-dimensional screen here.
Yeah.
Now, as humans, we will make the 2-dimension to 3-dimension jump, which is why the fallacy of time being the 4th dimension is a human. It's a human mistake.
Okay. Yeah.
Because all time does is animation. Now, kind of back to the see. So what they've done here is they've stretched the cube in a third dimension as if it were a fourth dimension, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, but the point is that from a three-dimension point, those two vertices are the same, right? You could pick any
I see. As it
connected by a line, and they would be the same.
As it spins here, like as it, oh my goodness, or as it rotates. I guess spin isn't the correct thing, but
because we can't talk in
four.
We can't talk in four dimensions. We have three-dimensional understanding.
Yeah, we don't have. Yeah.
Okay, so where am I headed?
I don't know, but I'm stuck watching the Tesseract. Where are you heading? I was asking you about. So the question was: some people have suggested that Willow is an indicator of multiple universes. I think is here. I might have deleted my note now that I asked you the question. Let me pull them
up. That's so. The reason I was bringing up mathematics is that in quantum theory, to get to the next step, they use 11-dimensional mathematics.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. The multiple dimensional theory.
Right. And then they simplify them back into 3 dimensions by ignoring 7 dimensions.
Okay.
Or they keep 3 and throw away 8.
I don't know if I quite understand exactly what you.
Well, they do a human simplification trick. They just say, okay, there's 11 dimensions, and we're just not going to care about 8 of them. They've neutered their mathematics.
I understand what you mean. So for what we don't have communicatory things for, or it's just not useful.
Yeah, now they do that in a practical sense. But in the imaginary sense, if there really are 11 dimensions to the universe, that's a lot to work with. And Nikola Tesla did it. He did an interesting experiment that they don't replicate today. So he did a
Drop your screen share because I got you slightly. Here, talk for me.
Well, if I were to screen share again, I would go back to the doodle pad.
Hop out of the restream and come back in because your audio and your video is slightly off, and I want to make sure that that's right for you. And it throws me the hell off. No, you may not be able to. Okay, good. Give it a little test.
That's better.
Yeah, it's better.
Better-ish.
It's just gonna be what it is.
Okay, so Nikola Tesla did a so if you were to speed of light, let's get my thing back on. Okay, so in a crude drawing, your speed of light is a wave, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you measure the wave, in essence, trough to trough, it has a certain speed that it travels, right?
Okay.
And so that's the classic measurement for the speed of light.
Okay.
So this would be if you thought of this as a hose or a string and you were waving it back and forth, you would have a wave pattern in the hose.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Now, Nikola Tesla said, if you took that hose and you tugged it, you would have a different speed. And his experiments showed that wiggling the hose back and forth at the speed of light was fine. Tugging the hose was faster than the speed of light.
Oh.
So that was his claim. Now, in current physics, Einstein's starting to be thrown out. Relativity is starting to be thrown out. In other words,
Wow.
about every 100 years, physics turns on its head appropriately, and new theories come in. You know, you had Faraday, and then you had Newton, then you had Faraday, then you had Maxwell, and then you had Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
And it's long overdue for Einstein to be thrown out. And there are some relativity measurements that show that Einstein was wrong. And part of the problem here is instead of taking the opportunity to rework their theories and come out with the new metaphor, they have been adding a fudge factor to keep the old metaphor. And the fudge factor is dark energy and dark matter. Mm. And the reason I call it a fudge factor is the measurements, the observations are 93% wrong. And what? So if you add a fudge, so what happens is as you measure the rotation of a galaxy, if the current physics, including relativity, were correct, the speed of the stars in the galaxy are 97% wrong to the formula.
Really?
And so they have to add dark matter, but that by definition you cannot measure, right? You have to add a fudge factor called dark matter to correct your observations back into the formula. And they have another thing they call dark energy. So they cannot explain the expansion of the universe as they observe it with the energy that they observe. And so they have to invent an energy that by definition you can't see to make the formulas match the observation. Now, in true science, and I would argue to a large extent, we've become a post-science world. In a true science form, you would take the observational evidence to throw out your theory and come up with new theories new exciting theories to match the observations.
Right.
And instead, they've crippled the scientists, if you will, because you don't get your PhD unless you tout the existing dogma. Right. And the same thing happened. I mean, you can look back in history, and the same thing happened with Darwinism. The same thing happened with continental drift. There was a day where before that day, you were an idiot and deluded if you thought continental drift was real. And within a week, because of the evidence, they couldn't deny it anymore. And then you were an idiot if you believed it wasn't real.
Right.
And so that's part of why they say science advances one gravestone at a time. That the dogma keepers have to die out for the new exciting theories to come forward. That there's a tipping point, if you will. Okay. And this kind of comes back to, here IBM is doing old dogma. Is Google doing new dogma? Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
They seem to be moving faster than IBM. Maybe they've looked at the quantum theories and applied some new theories to it. that aren't in the dogma.
Sure.
And you look at the string theory, which is 11 dimensions, which is supposed to, it's supposed to replace relativity and Newton and all this kind of stuff. And yet, in a dogmatic sense, they keep rolling it back to 3 dimensions. Well, if you embraced the multiple dimensions, you might be able to do additional things. I mean, they observe the Hall effect. They observe the Hall effect. You can see it in vacuum tubes. In an analog sense, you don't know what's going on in a silicon sense. But if you add some of those other dimensions that string theory has, you might be able to explain what the Hall effect is in a concrete fashion instead of just saying it's quantum magical. It's the same thing with the Schrodinger box. We observe it in a quantum magical sense, but if we add some additional mathematics and we try it out and we observe it to be true, it would change and improve our understanding of what's going on, and it would go out of the magic and into understanding. And so when I hear humans say this supports multiple dimensions, I think the human is still in magical thinking. And yet you can see the evidence of multiple dimensions in front of our eyes as scientists wrestle with this.
Yeah.
And so there may be some truth to it, just not in the way we think it is. We don't know how to think about it because we can't think in multiple dimensions.
Sure.
And so we think of time travel as a 3-dimensional magic trick.
Right. That's so interesting that you bring up time travel, because I've been thinking about time travel all week in relation to a couple of different things. Not doing time travel, but just as it relates to conversations, and the way that you're talking about it now makes a shit ton of sense and is really interesting.
Right. Let me make another point, because and not that you, well, go ahead and pull my graphic up again, or do you want me to reshare it?
I got you. I can do it. I'm learning these freaking tools, baby. I know how to use Restream.
Okay, so if we looked at the it's very good. If we looked at the top two lines, right?
Yeah.
And if you'll correct for my scribbling, the top line is 1 dimension, right?
Sure.
And it has a length in 1 dimension that we can measure. Now, the second line, would you call it 1 dimension or 2 dimension?
The squiggly one? Not the wave. The wave?
The wave. Is it 1 dimension or is it 2 dimensions?
I'd probably say it's 2 dimensions.
Well, 2 dimensions is this square. And you can measure a distance. You can traverse this squiggle, and you can get a 1-dimensional distance on it, right? If you were to map a formula along this line, it would have the characteristics. Your formula would be X and Y. It would have 2 dimensions, but you could plot it in 1 dimension. And my point is that this is actually a fractional dimension.
Oh, I feel less bad getting it wrong.
Yeah, no problem. This is 1.35, right? This is a 1.35 dimension, and how are we going to call it 1.35 dimensions? Is we're going to measure how much of it spills over into 2 dimensions, right? We're going to keep now. What we've added is fractional dimensions. So now you can take any animation, which is a typical animation is in 2 dimensions spread out over time. Time is a fractional dimension in this case. So an animation it's not fully 3 dimensions. It's 2 point something dimension, right?
Yeah, I see.
If you looked at the animation of the it's not a tessellation, but the 8-cell projection of the cube. See, and I guess you could count sides in this projection. Anyway, you've got me off track. But my point is that in school you'll learn time as an additional dimension, but it's not. It's an additional fractional dimension, which adds a little bit to it. And then you get the complexity of, you watch the animation in 2D, your mind projects into 3D. So now you're a fractional 2 dimensions, right? And then you add the time, but you're still in 2 dimensions. Your 2 dimension went from 2.3 to 2.8 because your 2 dimension is showing a 3-dimensional object that's moving.
Your 2 dimension is showing a 3-dimensional object that's moving. I think for some people, and we don't have to get too far down. I mean, I guess this is the question I asked, so we can continue to get pretty far down it. But I think for some people, you can have a relatively mobile and so sometimes for me, when I'm really visualizing in my mind, sometimes I can, like, rather than moving the shape, I can move my perspective.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So are you, yes. And that's kind of my point is, are you moving in a dimension?
Yeah, I see.
That's not 3-dimensional.
Like 3-point symbol pucky.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so is deja vu a hearkening to one of these dimensions, recognizing a pattern or a reflection from the past or the future?
So very, very interesting. And I think the summary of the answer to the question is it's certainly abstract enough to be considered. It's certainly not. We don't know, right. But it's not. You said something along the lines of living in magic or something along those lines. I can't remember exact words you used. In that it's not the agreed upon hard science, but that there are certainly things pointing to it, and here in your description, and then out in reality. So I think I love that as a mathematical take to what is possible, I would say, let me ask you just one or two more. Let me ask you one kind of economic based, and then one kind of playful question, and then we've done a wonderful job, you and me, of kind of hammering down into the topic and some of its different angles. I think of the questions that I have left, the thing that I think is probably most on, especially entrepreneurs' minds, is what kind of impact will Willow have on the economy most and first? And how should people engage with preparedness there, either to not be a blockbuster, and I mean that in the negative connotation, and be somebody that's prepared to tackle innovation.
Yeah, I here's kind of what I think. I think quantum in general, and I think we're going to see the quantum networking hit us first from a practical applications that's handed down. I think these things are going to continually blindside us, but not in a devastating way. But if you're able to, quote unquote, hedge your bets, you're going to run your business according to standard current dogma, and yet you're going to want to have a foot in the research and some of the cool technologies and hedge your bets, which can be expensive. And so, you're going to have to pick and choose. Now, in some ways, I do think that you can come in late to the game. So it might be sufficient to wait for, and it all depends. If it's a core business thing, so let's say your company, my daughter works for a company that does construction, insurance, planning. And so they'll take a big, office building, skyscraper construction and brute force plow through all the construction, all the materials, all the labor, just everything around the project management and materials procurement and human. If you can imagine how astounding, it's more than a room full of humans could do. So that company would benefit from quantum computing.
Sure.
Right? Because it's going to solve problems faster. They may want to be on the cutting edge because it's a significant leverage in the business they're already doing. They're making enough money. They can contribute to Google's fund some way to get an early adopter seat.
Right.
Right. Or they could buy NVIDIA time to simulate quantum things and start developing their quantum stuff now and shift over from NVIDIA inefficient ways to quantum efficient ways over time. So in that sense, they're putting their best foot forward. The rest of us can wait for Google's chip to come out, right? Your dominoes can still do modeling and AI to improve customer satisfaction and lower business costs. They can still do that with standard technology and have a small eye towards, hey, let's try that networking thing. Let's try.
Pizza's just showing up.
Right. Yeah, we have the Star Trek replicator. Pizza goes in here and it transfers way over there. From our oven to yours. Boom, It's hot, don't touch it.
Yeah. So, people would pay for it. So, so what you're saying is, what I think I hear you saying is, pay attention, stay in the know, but immediate application and impact isn't necessarily coming instantly, and you're probably going to see it play out in places where there have been really deep problems that need solving that haven't been solved over time. So it may not be so like a lot of technology, it's like, you see it and you feel it really quickly, but this sounds like it might be something that's going to solve long-term problems more efficiently.
Yeah. Let's say you have a quantum chip and you have it add two numbers, just like your CPU can add two numbers. The computer is waiting on the human the same amount of time. So even though the quantum computer could do trillions of additions, you just bought a quantum computer to add two numbers. You're not really making it's not effective. And in addition to trying to be aware of the unexpected, I think if you looked at Google search as a change of human behavior and a benefit to society, and you look at current AI, and we're kind of in the middle of its transition into adoption in business. So a lot of businesses have adopted it, and you look at that, you can see, if you were a business, you could see, I see how people are using it. Now I can see how I can use it. So even though you're late to the early game, you've been efficient. You haven't wasted money chasing something that isn't going to work. You're able to see where it's effective, and now you can plan on how to make it more effective. Right? That you waited long enough. So that's kind of the ideal thing. ChatGPT was out a couple of years ago. You saw it as a trend. You look at the Google thing the Google search as an indication of how society changed. You can speculate how society changed. You still wait a couple of years. You wait a couple of years more, and now there's concrete examples out. And so now you can say, okay, I'm going to do customer service with chatbots. It's mature enough. I didn't do it myself. That's okay. I'm paying somebody to do it. It's still a win-win. But my bake time, I'm going to do myself, in the domino sense.
Right.
And my delivery scheduling, I'm going to do myself. And my ingredient ordering, I'm going to do myself. Or Domino's will do it, right? It's not going to use ChatGPT for ingredients, but maybe Domino's, the corporate, comes out with it for the franchises. Here you go.
Well, they say they're a tech company first. Well,
scientific evidence would be backed up by observation. Doesn't matter what people say.
Oh, you came quick with that. Oh, no. I like that. That's good. That was really good. I'm not even gonna
see. I think that's a problem in society. Is
came quick with it.
We exercise our magical thinking instead of our analytic and observation thinking, right?
Wow.
Because if Einstein would say that, I don't think this was original. It's often quoted to him, but anyway, he says the intelligent person can have opposite ideas in their head at the same time, contrary opposite ideas in their head at the same time. And that's part of what we're saying that the business owner has to be is maybe AI will be wonderful and maybe it'll be destructive. And that, what's the timing? Well, there's an observation point of that. There's the imagine of what the possibilities are, which maybe is magical thinking, but you can have this two in your head at the same time. Right. I'm excited for this to come forward. It's not ready yet.
Right.
Oh, wait, there's this other thing. Maybe that's interesting. I'll put the exciting on hold, or I'll keep it in my mind, but I'm going to pursue this sidetrack because it's beneficial as well.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to do the quantum networking while I wait for the Heisenberg qubit to mature.
Right.
Because I don't see anything. There's no evidence that the quantum computing is in our hands. There's early indicators.
No. Well, that's not. No, I don't think anybody. It's just more exploring what is currently. Because I think so many people hear about AI.
If it comes true. Yeah. If it comes true, it's computers times 1,000, 10 times a trillion, times 10 trillion.
It might be a really
that's hard to imagine.
It might be. We talked before about decentralized AI and the different ways it could go. It might be that this type of breakthrough, especially if they can get the room temperature stable mechanism functioning, this might be what you would power your own personal AI off of, and then put evolved niche. Like you have a PC and you add programs, you may need a really high level personal artificial intelligence, like something like what's being developed. And then you adapt it to have specific skills based on whatever it is you're interested in accomplishing in the world and need to do.
Right. And you're causing me to, I've been too sloppy, and you're making me reflect that I need to be more precise. Today's version of AI is large language models. We probably shouldn't call it AI. We do in the vernacular because it's magical thinking, right? It has all that possibility behind it, but it is large language models and it's pattern matching based on probabilities. And the reason why I state that is the 1970s to the early 90s, the thrust in artificial intelligence was taking a kind of swallow the encyclopedia set approach to training computers. And it failed miserably, not because they didn't have computing power, but I think at some point I would say that human language in itself has quantum character. it has quantum characteristics going on that allow the two humans to communicate. And maybe it's part entanglement, maybe it's part Heisenberg uncertainty principles. There's some mechanism where two people can communicate with the fewest number of words and yet have the exact same understanding in their minds, right? It is our central nervous system antennas, right? Is there something going on in an additional dimension that's fostering our communications? And my point is that the computer scientists in the 70s to the early 90s were trying to create conscious, intelligent computers through knowledge acquisition only. And they failed miserably. And this is where the neural nets come in, which is the basis of the large language models, is giving up on the brute force attempt. The scientists then began, spearheaded by creative individual scientists, they started saying, let's take natural approaches to what's going on. And so instead of trying to, you have optical character recognition, right? Where you see a picture of handwriting and you can turn it into characters. The brute force attempt, it fails because you can't have an image of all possible handwritten letters. You can't go from the analog to the digital and have all possible matches. So the neural net approach was through probabilities, which is able to go from future possibilities matched into through a neural net map matched into the letter. So if you think of a grid of neurons coming down, you would have the letter you're detecting at one point, and then a network of arrays that overlap to the image. And then the computer says, out of all the possibilities that get added up, the letter that's indicated is the highest possibility, so that's the one that's used. So like the letter, the letter E and the letter B could have some
numeric
could
value.
Be ambiguous, or the letter Q and the letter O could be ambiguous, or the large cursive letter A and the letter O could be ambiguous, and so on.
Yeah.
And so out of all the neural nets, there are certain neurons that have precedents that say, oh, the squiggly's on the top, so it's a cursive letter O. The squiggly's on the bottom, so it's cursive letter A, or the squiggly's along the bottom, so it's a cursive letter Q. You can see, right? So it's not all the neurons that are firing. It's the outstanding ones that are firing. I mean, you got it narrowed down to cursive A, cursive O, cursive Q, which could be all big circles, and then there's just a small indicator.
And it depends on how well somebody executes the writing as well, which would limit the.
Yeah, well, and the example here is, let's say the letter Q has it has the long dash on the bottom. Well, the letter E has a long dash, so the long dash is firing for the letter E and D and any of them, but the other neurons now have precedence because it's not an O shape, so I'm going to ignore the bottom. I'm going to ignore the Q sensitivity. That doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of have this shifting landscape of, as the image comes in, that shifting landscape of probabilities that direct it to a subset, that direct it to a single individual. Right? So one level says it's O, Q, or A. Another level might, and then the last level says, well, given that it's O, Q, or A, then it's Q because of that line. Where another set would say, well, it's D or B or E.
Right.
Anyway, I've gone on track a little bit, but that's kind of the point, is that well, the point I was headed to is when scientists gave up on a computer being conscious, they made a supposition that in order for intelligent consciousness to exist, it needed to have a physical needed to have a physical manifestation, meaning you could a robot, an intelligent robot could become self-aware because it had physical limitations. And so if you took quantum computing into your robots, that might be where consciousness and intelligence actually flourish, because you have the physical limitations.
Well, you may also
the supercomputing.
Well, you may also see it arising in, and I mean, we're definitely down a road here that we're down a road here that could be talked a lot about. But I mean, if you think about consciousness, I mean, if my consciousness was in a box, I would be aware of my limitations, especially as I'm being like asked to do and produce certain things. And so, I mean, if it's interesting, you know what I mean? It's interesting what you're saying. And it's going to be interesting to see how everything unfolds.
Well, and let's put this on a continuum. If your existence was only inside a Heisenberg uncertainty box, you only had the uncertainty box, your existence is meaningless because you have all possibilities at the same time and yet no constraints to act on them. Yeah. On the other end of the continuum, if you never had any quantumness at all, now you're kind of stuck in the early computing knowledge things where you have all this quote unquote knowledge, but no meaning. And so it's that notion of the individual things. It's a notion of kind of that collusion between the uncertainty and the physical constraints which gets into human existence. It's that collusion between those two that gives you all that future possibility.
Yeah.
And yet all that you get that accomplishment in the future based on the constraints of the present. And you need that imagination, you need that quantum uncertainty to imagine it.
To need to be put in a direction.
Right.
For drive and create outcomes.
Right. And human psychologists will talk about anxiety. It gets into left brain, right brain things where the left brain is working on a plan, and anxiety comes in when the plan isn't going according to plan. So humans, as an existence, right? I got
good at anxiety in my life because boy, it's not been. It's always been prepare for the unexpected. Keep going.
Yeah. Well, and that perseverance of pivoting as needed and getting a new plan and going back to planning. And so like if you're in a chaotic world where you high anxiety, chaos, things don't go to plan, and yet you've succeeded in reworking the plan. Now your goal has come true, even though the way you got there was unforeseen.
Right.
Now that's a sense of accomplishment and euphoria, if you will.
Yeah. Well,
and in essence, that's a higher human existence.
You've grown.
It's a laudable and a higher human existence. And I think part of what happens is we get too far in the Schrodinger box. So maybe this is I'm just speculating here, blue sky with you and throwing things out. So if we raise our children to be stuck in and addicted to video games, right? So especially the males, where they're doing action games. The females tend to do social social games, and which is still terrible. So in the female sense, female suicide has gone up. A lot of it is attributed to social media. Social media has a lens effect where people post the positive things and not the negative. So then the female mind says, everybody's doing better than me. I'm doing terrible. They don't see the terrible in others. They don't project. So then it causes depression, because why is my life so miserable and everybody else on social media is doing so great? And then the other thing from the female mind, and I would project that men have that thinking as well. You get the dopamine rush of the likes. How many people liked my post, right? And so there's an addiction there. And then on the male side with the gaming, so you have this accomplishment in the games. It's not a physical accomplishment. It doesn't help them eat. Doesn't help them pay the rent.
But it does.
And yet,
release.
Right, they're short-circuited. They're short-circuited to, I made these plans. I became an expert. I pivot and so forth. So maybe it's a good skill, but because it's so disconnected from the physical world, do they stay in the Schrodinger box and recluse into that?
Sure.
And then when they're thrown into the physical world and just say, well, you just, drive the pizza to where where the app tells you to go. And yet I get yelled at. And so now things didn't go as planned. I'm going back to my Schrodinger box.
Yeah.
I can't handle the anxiety because I haven't been conditioned for it. And so you can see how harsh that would be. Now, my question is, are we doing a disservice to society because we're raising generations of people with electronics that are short-circuiting their practical experience?
This is something that you and I often, when we're talking privately on the phone and doing what we're doing publicly now, which has been a freaking blast, I always take the people and training approach because that's my background, and you have the more 1+1 and the more black and white approach, the bad good. And so if we weren't humans that weren't able to directly impact what it is, plan and change and take in the information and adapt based on what we're seeing, I would be really worried about what you're saying. But the reality is there are good parents and there are bad parents. There are good teachers and coaches. There are bad teachers and coaches. There are good friends. There are bad friends. There are good wives and husbands. There are bad wives and husbands. And really it comes down to, is the community that's surrounding either yourself or your family or your children or whoever we're attempting to grow, are they expecting the individual to learn how to overcome challenges, to apply what they're learning to life, to plan and adapt? Or are they doing what I've seen in my personal family? We've got a lot of codependency and alcoholism in my family, and not calling anybody out. Love you, mom and grandma. But my grandma spent a lot of time in life supporting my mother in ways where she really needed to go out there and experience the challenges. She needed to get out of Schrodinger's box more than what she was. And because of how much my grandmother loved my mom, that took longer than necessary. Now, that's case by case. And just because the tool is there, just because the thing to recluse into is there, it's all about what we decide in society is or isn't okay. If people are met with challenges in life and they never even make an attempt to overcome those challenges, we should think a certain way about that. I have particular feelings about that because of what I've overcome in my life and what tenacity and resilience has meant to me. But there's some level of expectation as a community we should have to go out and strive and achieve. And I think that expectation and support, whether it be like, hey, this is how you get over being, turned down by a girl or turned down by a job, or this is how you get over being yelled at by somebody in a sports game or at a work, in a heated, work altercation, or, customer in the restaurant, like you said, with the delivery. instead of allowing the pure reclusion, a good community helps people get through whatever the challenges are. And then that makes for a better community, because in the future, that person could maybe help somebody else based on the experience they had. So, your question was, are we doing ourselves a massive disservice? I think we could do ourselves a massive disservice, but we could also build really tremendous communities that are all about building each other up and holding each other accountable for what's possible, which starts with what you said: planning, replanning, identification, and if you're really committed, tenacity and resilience.
Yeah, so this research happened in European Union. They found out that autism, in many cases, a significant subsection of autistic children had a problem with short-term memory. And if they would have those children, and this had a huge success rate, if they had those children play a computer game that had a maze and had it kind of like a problem solving thing. So, maybe you go into one room in the maze and there's a big number on the wall, and you don't care about the number. And then you go through the other maze and now you get a door, and the code to unlock the door is that number. Now you have to go back and get the number, and then you have to remember it and come back to the door and punch it in. So that's all exercising the short. So if they had an entertaining game that exercised short-term memory, those autistic children would come out of autism. And I mean, that's amazing. That's incredible.
What that makes me want to explore is, how do we define autism? But we can't get too deep into that, because if you can come out of it, then surely there are it has to be a developmental deficiency that could be solved for.
Right. And I think you have to be careful, because they call it a spectrum, right? There are some
good point.
Autism. There are some autistic people where their middle brainstem has a deformity in it, and you can MRI scan. Yep, there's the deformity, and it has these characteristics. And another reason they call it the spectrum, you've got Asperger's, and you've got you've got high functioning and low functioning, and all these kinds of things. And ADHD is the same thing. There's, like, my daughter had a form of ADHD where she wasn't hyperactive, but she couldn't pay attention. And it was painful for her to read. And we did a bunch of research, and we found that if you had a pink filter over the text, she would read in her kind of autism. And so we tried it. Here she is, she hates reading, she doesn't want to read. We put the pink filter on, she's like, the words are not jumping.
Wow.
So can you imagine trying to read with the words jumping? You put the pink filter on and the words aren't jumping. Oh, I can rely on words, they stay in the same place. Yeah. Well, it didn't take long. She didn't need the pink filter anymore. She reads fine. Doesn't need the pink filter.
Yeah.
But there's some kind of awareness jump that, where before words give me a headache, now that I can read them, I understand their usefulness. I understand they're not really jumping. And then I guess the brain rewires itself, and you don't need the pink anymore. And I would go one other, in my generation, if you had dyslexia, yeah, it sucks to be you. And just, work harder. You had no support at all and no sympathy. And then somewhere in the 80s, you had only sympathy and coddling and no real support. Your coddling was mistaken as support, and you're wonderful, and dyslexia is your superpower. And now you have a dysfunctional human being. And now there are actually mechanisms, because our again, it gets back to the human existence. We live in the flow, and dyslexia is a brain flow problem. And because as you're reading the words, it's kind of like that AI match. As you're reading the words, the neural net comes and says, this is the word, and this is the letters, this is how it's spelled. Well, if that flow is miswired, you have dyslexia. And the point of retraining the brain is to put an administrative pause at ahead of the dyslexic point. And so what they do is that you have to copy this text, and the letters you have trouble with, so you have to write those letters in a different color. So you're writing the text in your gray pencil. Oh, I'm coming up on a D, a DP.
So you force the conscious attention on the thing
right.
that needs to
and
be.
So the interruption causes the admin to come in. You write it the correct way. It rewires the flow path. You put the pencil bound, you go back into flow. So the more you do that, the less you need, once you've corrected the flow, you no longer have dyslexia. So you don't need to coddle them, and you don't need to send them home to just deal with it.
Well, that's
right?
life, though, I mean, not to so let me say it differently. It maybe isn't life. When I spent a lot of time in the restaurant industry, and the majority of what I was doing was training people, it was all about being within reality with them. And it starts with, well, what was the intended outcome and what was the outcome? And having that conversation. And depending on what relationship the individual has with achievement and their level of emotional intelligence, they would either be more or less likely to take feedback, which would create a more or less uncomfortable interaction. Sometimes people would be like, I can't wait to learn. Yeah, let's go. And sometimes people would take it as a, defensive thing. But it all comes down to, can you get the individual to put conscious attention on what they're supposed to be doing? And I'm hearing you describe these things with reading, which when I hear the words jumping, it makes me think the eyes were probably moving around and there was some kind of focus issue on the eyes, and with dyslexia being in flow, they say that people generally are able to read words with just the first and the last word and the context clues. So there's probably some kind of relationship to high level intelligence, speed, and then not getting that detail that was necessary. And then what you're describing is taking that focus and putting it on it. I mean, I think about people that made shitty pizzas because they were going too fast. It's just like writing a word misspelled. It's like, yeah, you know how to make it a circle, but you don't know how to make it a pizza. And it's just interesting. It all seems to. Now, I don't want to say all because I'm going to get somebody telling me how this and that, but it often seems to point to where you put your attention and what you choose to work on and grow with is what comes. And the reality is, your point was, you don't have to coddle people, and you don't have to be hard on people. You just have to help people through it. You have to help people where they don't know where their focus needs to be. The dyslexic folks that you're describing are making that mistake because they don't have the process to slow down and connect it.
Well, right. They don't have any other existence.
Right.
They're not aware of any other existence. And like in your pizza example, but this would be right up your alley with Triunity. You want the employee in the flow, and you want the flow to be correct. So they can't be in the flow without flowing. And yet they can't correct the flow without stepping out of it, getting the admin function of their brain working, and then going back into it. And so again, so they make the pizza fast, but they're doing it wrong. So you have to find kind of the starting point of them doing it wrong, and say, okay, go to here and then stop.
And you have to make them do it, because they're not going to do it themselves. To your point, they don't understand the break in the loop. And
they have no awareness of the existence of doing the flow correctly.
So when you coddle people, and that's your superpower is making shitty pizzas. Well, it's not your superpower. And when you
And
are,
you just went out of business.
yeah, right. And when you're brazen with people, where you're not patient enough to show them where the mistake is, now you create enemies. When you can understand this is a human
And you
being
don't
that
get
has
the
a
pizza
gap.
right anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And they hate you. You have to understand what it takes to train and develop people, and it's getting them comfortable enough for them to feel like their conscious attention can be with you, and they trust you enough to direct it. Here's where I want your
when you
focus.
think about flow, when you are in flow, you are completely defenseless, right? You are blindsided by everything but the flow. So it's a dangerous. If you're in an unfamiliar environment or you're not in a supportive environment,
You have to be focused.
yeah, you are unable to enter the flow because you have to be aware of other things. And yet, when you have that comfort, when you are in the comfortable where you can flow, now none of the other stuff matters. You don't care who's answering the phone. You're making the pizza the way you're supposed to be making it. You're not worried about who's driving. You're not worried. You're making the pizza. You're in the flow. You're doing what you need to do.
And that's one reason as leadership, it's so important to have a leader who's telling everybody where they're supposed to go. The quarterback tells the play to the other 10 guys on the field because he's putting everybody where they're going to go be in flow if they've done practice right. If you're in a restaurant, the servers go where the servers need to be. The food makers go where the food makers need to be.
Yeah.
And it's now everybody goes aces in your play, and you can flow because the people are doing the things they know how to do.
Okay, so the leader needs to multi-flow.
He needs to so what they call it is you're surfing, or you're supporting. You have to know all the different things, and whenever one of those boxes is degrading and the flow is falling apart, you go and you put it back together so they can continue to flow. And that's what good restaurant leadership looks like. And it's an efficiency thing, right? You have everything that you need set up, and when there's a surge, the leader goes and fills in because they can do everything.
Yeah, when they're filling in, they're not able to multi-flow. When they're observing, they can multi-flow in the sense of, and maybe it's
just a different kind of flow.
Maybe it's still cereal, but the kitchen's flowing correctly. I can see that because I'm familiar with the flow. Serving staff is flowing correctly. Bus staff is flowing correctly.
Wherever they put the attention, it's an analysis of, is this right? Is this right? Do I need to be there? And you can get a sense, like you can stand in a room and get a sense for, does somebody need me in a part of the room? And you can definitely do it in a restaurant. You look over, it's like, oh, they've got an entire thing full of tickets, or the phones won't stop ringing, or somebody's yelling at somebody at the front. You can kind of get a sense if you have enough understanding of the restaurant in general, and if you're a strong enough leader, you can be in flow with the whole restaurant and know where it is you need to go. But every one of those pieces of the restaurant are in flow with the micro of the small thing. And that's why leadership is important, because the leader's a leader because they know the different things to a depth and have an abundance of knowledge.
Yeah, and this gets back to your passion of, and I think it's an insight that you've surfaced. If you use AI to solve this problem, you can see how it would scale the manager's awareness, and yet the manager still has to step in and be able to flow in the instance it needs to take care of. You can also see how, from an AI perspective, you really probably need different models for each different flow that you're trying to manage. That you can't approach this as, here's the grand unified manage a restaurant AI or whatever the business solution is. That if you piece it apart, now you might have a supervisory AI that watches the other AIs, but you've just accumulated things in tiers. The kitchen AI does kitchen stuff only, and the concierge AI does concierge stuff only.
and they know the process perfect, so they do it perfect, and they're not wasting energy. It's aces in their places from a human perspective, but for the machine, so that the machine does exactly what the human needs the machine to do, and that the process can go. And if you have it's exactly like that, which is why I'm a big believer in creating niche AI, just like you create when you're running a restaurant, you hire somebody, you put them in the position that they're most suited to learn. And then if they're capable of learning and they have a good attitude, you teach them other shit. And then if they learn enough stuff, now you can teach that person how to manage people. Now, you don't have to do that with AI, but the efficiency of I only have to train this person this thing. Like when somebody starts their first day in a restaurant, it's not like, okay, you're going to learn how to make the whole menu. It's like, let's get you how to make bread sides right. Let's get you how to make a pizza right. Or let's get you how to take a phone call or whatever it is that is going to provide immediate value right now. You don't say, let's get you how to do everything. And part of what I see, especially in the tech industry, and what I'm starting to see in the tech industry in their sales departments, is people want to bring on a salesperson that like already knows their CRM, knows exactly their clients, knows exactly how to close, how to set up meetings, how to do all these things. When the reality is when you bring people in, you teach them all of those different skills and make them a sales executive by them learning how to close, by them learning how to prospect, by them learning how to have data aggregation, because then that person can run a whole sales department. Similarly, in the restaurant, learning how to handle a customer, make a pizza, manage the driver situation, manage the food, and then now they can be a full managerial person. We don't, especially in this technical space where the people skills are not the predominant strength. The systems to build people up are not developed at all, and the expectations of people are on the far side of things without any of that ability to pull them out of the process and point to them in terms of this is how you get better. And I keep saying this, and eventually somebody's going to be like, man, he's freaking right. The organizations in the tech space that learn how to develop people and retain people at a high level are going to be the ones that go the furthest with artificial intelligence, because with every AI system, there's going to be a surface area of value, whether it be data or things that could be done, that the AI isn't perfectly trained on how to execute or efficient on how to execute, that either another AI system needs to be butted up to, or a human needs to take that output and go execute somewhere with it. And you might be a company that's like, well, I'm going to get all these AI systems and I'm going to be really profitable. And you probably will in the short term, but in the long term, the businesses that are going to be maximally successful are going to be the ones that are able to integrate human output and understanding how to get humans to interact with the AI systems at the highest level, because you're going to come to economies of scale with what people can do with the AI systems. So you're going to have to teach people how to be able to use and understand these systems. And the reality is they're pretty freaking complex if you want to do it right.
Yeah.
And differentiatedly right? Because it's not going to be that there's 10,000 companies that have AI sales tools, right? It's going to be that there are 5 win in the end,
Yeah.
or some subset of 5.
I think you were working on this in Toledo in the sense that, and I do think eventually it will happen. You were early and didn't have the ingredients didn't come together. Now, if you're still passionate about it, you can pivot and bring them together. But the point is I believe you're going to be able to have an ecosystem, and several places are almost there. They just don't have the complete picture. They're not considering the small business. But the point is you're going to have an ecosystem where, TriUnity, a business can come to TriUnity and you'll say, oh yeah, I've got a part-time data scientist. He'll whip it for you pretty quickly. We can take care of the weird weather problem you have that makes your product unreliable. That's no problem. We can get that together, and you just need an NVIDIA PC, and it's going to cost $100,000 to rent some time over here to get the big model done. But from then on, we'll be in a steady state, and it'll only be this much a month, and your profitability will increase. So you can pay TriUnities this much, and you can pay the data scientists this much, and off we go. And you've got a win-win all around. And I believe that those models will not be big tech models. They will be small models that either are open sourced and then subsequently specialized, or kind of the tool set, kind of like an engineering house. There's a tool set of models that get paraded around and reused by TriUnity over and over again because they're useful. And then it gets to what we were talking about, that whatever the business flow is, if it is discretely divided up, you will have an AI model for each discrete measurement.
Yeah.
And then to some point, it's more of an alert to the business owner or the manager that, hey, there's a problem in this area. We think it's this. Go get them back on track.
Yeah. And that's why so I'm a big believer, and I told somebody this yesterday. Good guy. I'm a big believer in you need the human element. And I think I said this on this call. You need to keep the human element, because you're always going to need the people that are human experts to train on what the humans need now, because that's how you're going to get the different. That's how you're not. If the AI models degrade and if they become less perfect over time because of getting other information from other AIs, then you're always going to need a human standing outside of the loop, looking at the loop, watching the AI do what it does, and then listening to what the actual humans are saying. Because if the humans are the ones making purchasing decisions, and there's 10 AI tools that do sales phone calls, and only one of them is taking the feedback from what the humans think about the interactions that they're having with the AI sales process, then the company that's taking the feedback about how they're imperfect are going to be the ones that grow. And you're going to want experts. Like, you're not going to want a BD analyzing the AI systems. You're going to want the guy that went through and learned every stage and is highly specialized and trained in sales, analyzing what the AI is doing. So you're going to need processes where you have differentiated human talent, not so much like we have now, but it's not going to be none, because the ones that have none aren't going to have the ability to look outside of the loop and see what is changing, so they can be ahead of the change. They might be solutions that are really good and they're quick with adapting with what the other solutions are doing, but they'll never be the leaders. And then there'll be many that try and don't have differentiated enough value to even be a part of the conversation.
Right.
Which is what happens in the economy now with restaurants and consulting firms and everything else.
Yeah. Well, it's the point is you treat it as a workforce multiplier, not as a replacement.
Yeah. If you treat it as a replacement, it's like so your people are like the seeds of your farm. And if you rip everything up and sell it all, which is what if a replacement job would be with AI, then you don't have any roots. And when tough times come, you're going to be the one that doesn't have any roots. But you'll make a lot of money in the short term, so make sure you use it. Or make sure you're right.
Maybe not.
Yeah, right, exactly. Because the market's going to move fast.
Right. And without the human introspection of what's going on, AI may be doing the exact wrong thing.
Right. So I got a last question here, because we've had a banger of a podcast. And I need to put some food in me. All right. If you could ask Google one question about Willow and what's going on over there, what would you ask them?
I would ask to see their patents.
Let's tell everybody what you're looking for.
Well, I would be looking for the crux of the invention. I mean, it's a hardware invention.
Yeah.
They should patent it. They may not. I mean, there's reasons not to patent things. Maybe the exclusive hardware will last longer if they don't patent it and give. See, the thing with a patent is you expose the technology in a way that other people can replicate it so that you can get protection on your replication of it.
Right.
But yeah, that's what I would like to see. And I guess the other aspect is because I'm hearing rumblings of it. I don't. Have you heard of 0 point energy?
No.
And some people speculate that Tesla was close on this. Where Tesla had
Mr.
light bulbs. He got kicked out of Colorado because he had a laboratory in an area that didn't have any earthquakes, and he set up this laboratory, and all of a sudden they were earthquake central, and the people in the area were like, "You don't like
this guy out of here.
You have to get out of here." But he would do funny things, like he would put a light bulb in the ground and it would light up.
Oh,
just put it in the ground. So he was, and he had funding from JP Morgan and Chase, and because they were all excited about it. And then they were asking, okay, so how do we make money on this? And he's like, no, we don't make money on this. We're getting energy out of the atmosphere.
He said the wrong thing.
It's just an antenna.
He said the wrong thing. It's not we don't make money on this. It's the innovation never stops after this.
Yeah, he got the rug pulled out from him so hard that he died in a hotel room married to a pigeon. It's a sad story. It's a sad story. So, well, there you go. That's Tesla. But see, he was working in some of these quantum things. Now, in quantum mechanics, they have a thing called 0 point energy. And again, as we talked about, we don't believe times can go backwards, but the mathematical formulas go back and forth as if it could. And one of those mathematical formulas, and again, this is theory, we don't have practical observation of it, but the point is that you can have matter and antimatter spontaneously created and then destructed at the same time. It just cancels itself out. Now, if you were able to harvest half of that creation and interrupt it, you would create an energy gap, and then you could harvest that energy gap. And
you better be careful, John. So they're gonna come get you.
I know. I don't have any invention along that way, but that's the point. Is Google playing with quantum to the point that you could get energy out of it? And if you could, now you don't need batteries for your electric car.
We're living in a crazy world, John.
We are. I would love to get to the crux of their invention.
I used to have to put 2 AA batteries into my Game Boy Advance, or my Game Boy Color, so that it didn't turn off while I was training my Gengar. And now I'm never going to have to worry about that again. And there are other things to worry about. So it's exciting times. Tell people about enCircle Marketplace, and if they wanted to work with you and all of your expertise, where they can do that.
enCircle Marketplace, I've got some great vendors that do security products at all levels, from virus scanners to full dashboards of compliance, and insurance brokers. We've got I'm kind of excited about it. We have an AI vulnerability. So it's an attacker, right? You have to flip the switch of how destructive you want it. And it does a good job. So it can do non-destructive testing, or you can say, no, I really want to know if this can be hacked, and it will, change the root account password.
Okay.
So anyway, and we talked about AI and hallucinations before, and this is the one where it uses hallucinations as a good thing because it invented an attack that actually works that no human came up with. So
and I was rolling my eyes because of the use of, because it's going to be a real uphill battle to get people to start using extrapolate. I don't think I have enough clout.
You have to de-anthropomorphize that.
Yeah,
that's your bumper sticker.
That's absolutely true.
And it's the same thing. AI in the 70s was the computer knows everything, and they had to give up on that because there was it's contextless. So without context, it was unable to be useful or practical in any way.
Yeah.
And so that's what the large language models do, is they're steeped in context, right? The whole question and answer are related by contextual cues. And the whole thing with the supposition, the theory that you can't have consciousness without physical limitations. That's part of that's part of that those physical limitations give a construct that the artificial knowledge can now push against.
Absolutely. Well, we've had a tremendous conversation about Willow. Hopefully, we've uncovered some of what is going on, but we definitely had an awesome conversation. And John, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us and being a regular on the show. And I look forward to the next time we have one of these great conversations. As for some of the things TriUnity is doing, I would say the best thing that you can do to engage with our brand is either reach out on our website or to me directly. And then the other best thing is stay up to date with our events section on our website. Over the weekend, we're going to be adding a bunch of things upcoming, some workshops, some more Twitch streams where you can come in and do career and business questions, and some other exciting stuff. So if you want to be involved in the things that we're doing or know what we've got going on, that's the best place to do it. On there, you'll see that next week we're having a friend of mine from St. Louis, Brianna Bifignani, is coming on for a Business Strategy Roundtable fitness episode. She's going to share her journey of building a fitness organization starting during COVID. So her entrepreneurial journey is pretty dynamic and interesting. And I'm sure we'll talk about some good fitness strategies that pretty much everybody should employ, because having a healthy body and a healthy brain are really good for problem solving and living a great life. So that's next week. Thank you so much for those of you guys who listened to the full 3-hour episode this time around. John, thanks for sticking it out. And I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Thanks, everybody. See you.